The winter fog clung to the ground outside Holtzwihr, France, like a burial shroud. It was January 26, 1945, and Obergefreiter Klaus Werner had survived 4 years of war. Russia, North Africa, Italy. He'd seen friends burned alive in tanks, watched artillery turn men into red mist, endured Soviet human wave attacks that seemed to have no end. Nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness. Werner crouched behind a snow-covered hedgerow with what remained of his platoon, 37 men that morning, now 23. The American position ahead looked vulnerable. A handful of infantry in foxholes, one burning tank destroyer belching black smoke into the gray sky. His company commander had ordered the attack with confidence. 250 men, 6 tanks, against maybe 40 Americans. The mathematics seemed right. Then Werner heard it, a sound he'd learned to dread over the past 6 months fighting in France and now Germany. Not the high-pitched scream of incoming artillery, not the crack of rifle fire. This was deeper, rhythmic, like a giant tearing canvas with mechanical precision. Thump, 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 thump. The American on the burning tank destroyer had opened fire. What happened next would haunt Werner for the rest of his life. The man, later Werner would learn his name was Lieutenant Audie Murphy, stood fully exposed on the turret of a vehicle that might explode at any moment. Fire licked at the hull, smoke poured from the engine compartment. And Murphy didn't flinch. He simply turned the turret-mounted .50 caliber machine gun toward the attacking Germans and began firing. The first burst caught a squad in the open. Men fell like wheat before a scythe. The second burst found the lead panzers accompanying infantry. They scattered. The third burst, fourth, fifth, Murphy traversed the gun with methodical precision, firing continuously, pausing only to adjust his aim. Werner watched his company disintegrate. The man beside him took a round through the chest. The impact threw him backward 3 meters. Another soldier tried to take cover behind a tree. The .50 caliber rounds punched through the trunk and found him anyway. The tanks tried to support the infantry, but Murphy simply shifted fire, forcing the tank commanders to button up, leaving the infantry without covering fire. For over an hour, one American with one gun held off an entire reinforced company. When Werner's unit finally withdrew, fewer than 70 effective soldiers remaining from the 250 who'd attacked, he staggered to the aid station. The medics were overwhelmed, not from the number of wounded, but from the nature of the wounds. A soldier who'd taken a .50 caliber round to the leg simply did not have a leg anymore. The massive projectile, half an inch in diameter, weighing as much as 3 rifle bullets, had sheared through bone and tissue like it wasn't there. Another man had been hit in the shoulder. The round had continued through his torso, exiting through his hip on the opposite side. There was nothing the medics could do but make him comfortable. Werner sat on a bench outside the aid station, hands shaking as he tried to light a cigarette. An older sergeant, a veteran of the First World War, sat beside him. "What weapon was that?" Werner asked. The sergeant didn't look at him. "The Americans call it the Browning .50 caliber. We used to laugh at it. Simple design, nothing sophisticated. Just an old, heavy machine gun." "How did one gun do that to us?" Now the sergeant turned. His eyes were hollow. "Because they have 10,000 of those guns. 100,000, who knows? And they never run out of ammunition. They fire them from everything. Tanks, trucks, airplanes, tripods. They fire at anything that moves and most things that don't." He finally lit Werner's cigarette. "We thought superior training and tactics would win. We were wrong. They don't need to be better soldiers. They just need to have more bullets." Werner would survive the war. Lieutenant Murphy would receive the Medal of Honor for his actions that day at Holtzwihr, with official citations confirming approximately 50 German casualties from his lone stand. The burning tank destroyer never exploded, And Werner would spend the rest of his life telling anyone who'd listen about the day he learned that German tactical excellence meant nothing against American industrial might, made manifest in a single, brutally simple weapon, the Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun. The Germans called it 50 Kaliber, 50 caliber, but the name didn't capture the fear. By 1945, German soldiers had learned to hate this weapon more than Allied tanks, more than artillery, more than the dreaded P-51 Mustangs that ruled the skies, because those weapons killed you. The 50 caliber machine gun did something worse. It killed your hope. Let's rewind 3 years. September 6th, 1943. The skies over Stuttgart belong to the Luftwaffe. This is their domain. They are masters of aerial combat, with tactics refined over 2 years of war and pilots who've shot down dozens of Allied aircraft. Oberleutnant Heinrich Wormholer adjusts his oxygen mask and scans the horizon from the cockpit of his FW-190, 93 Victories, Knight's Cross with oak leaves recipient. He's seen every kind of Allied aircraft, knows their weaknesses, understands how to exploit them. Today's targets are American B-17 Flying Fortresses, 388 of them approaching Stuttgart for the first major daylight raid on the city. Wormholer isn't worried. The American bombers are large, slow, and packed tightly together for mutual defense. His squadron will make high-speed passes from ahead and above, using their 420mm cannons and two 13mm machine guns to tear apart the lead bombers before the formation can react. It's a proven tactic. It's always worked. At 800 meters, Wormholer opens fire. His cannons thunder. Shells streak toward the lead B-17. He's already anticipating the satisfying sight of an engine exploding, a wing shearing off. Then the bombers erupt, not with the smoke of damage, with muzzle flashes. Hundreds of muzzle flashes. The sky itself seems to be firing back at him. Each B-17 carries 13 Browning M2 machine guns. 13. A formation of 36 bombers means 468 heavy machine guns, all firing the same 50 caliber cartridge that can reach out nearly 2,000 meters with lethal effect. Wormholer's FW-190 shudders. Something punches through his left wing. Another round tears through his canopy, missing his head by centimeters. A third round, he feels rather than hears it, slams into his engine cowling. Glycol spray erupts across his windscreen. His engine temperature gauge climbs into the red. He breaks off the attack, diving away with his aircraft trailing smoke and hydraulic fluid. Looking back, he sees other fighters from his squadron doing the same. Some are on fire. One simply comes apart in mid-air, torn to pieces by the concentrated defensive fire. This isn't how it's supposed to work. The Germans had been told the American heavy machine guns were primitive, simple recoil-operated weapons designed before sophisticated engineering transformed warfare. The Luftwaffe had 20mm cannons that could destroy a bomber with a single well-placed shot. The Americans had machine guns. What the Germans hadn't understood, what they were learning now in the most brutal way possible, was that the Americans had solved the bomber defense problem not through sophistication, but through overwhelming volume of fire. Each B-17G carries between 5,000 and 7,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. Some crews add extra boxes beyond regulations. The guns are positioned to create overlapping fields of fire from every angle: nose, tail, dorsal turret, ball turret, waist guns. Attack from ahead, the nose guns and top turret engage. From behind, tail guns and ball turret. From the sides, waist guns. From above or below, the turrets track and fire. There is no safe approach vector. And here's the part that makes German pilots start writing letters home that their families will struggle to understand. The American guns never stop firing. German doctrine emphasizes fire discipline. Ammunition is precious. Trigger time must be rationed. A German pilot makes careful, aimed bursts with his cannons, knowing that continuous fire will exhaust his ammunition and overheat his weapons. The American bombers just hold down the triggers. Wormholer manages to nurse his damaged fighter back to base. In the debriefing, the intelligence officer records the losses: 45 B-17s shot down. A victory, technically, but the Luftwaffe has lost pilots they cannot replace, experienced aces, men with hundreds of combat hours. "How many did you shoot down?" the intelligence officer asks. Wormholer stares at his hands. They're still shaking. "None. I broke off after one pass. The defensive fire." He trails off. How do you explain that the sky turned into steel, that visibility disappeared behind the tracers, that his aircraft took hits from multiple directions simultaneously? The intelligence officer makes notes. Other pilots report similar experiences. They describe the American defensive fire as die fliegende Festungen, the flying fortresses. But what makes them fortresses isn't their armor or their formation discipline. It's those 50 caliber machine guns that never stop firing, never jam, never give an opening. By October 1943, Luftwaffe fighter units are adapting their tactics. They try head-on attacks, diving from above, climbing from below, attacking from the sides. Nothing works consistently. For every approach vector, the American gunners have overlapping fields of fire. The bombers fly in combat box formations, specifically designed to maximize defensive firepower. 18 to 21 aircraft arranged in three-dimensional space so that an attacker is always under fire from multiple bombers simultaneously. Lieutenant Wolfgang Fischer, a Bf-109 pilot flying bomber intercept missions over the Reich, survives long enough to give testimony at the post-war Luftwaffe debriefings in March 1946. To attack the Americans is to fly through a storm of steel. You see the tracers, 1 round in 5, and you know that for every tracer you see, 4 more bullets you cannot see are flying past. When you close to effective cannon range, you're already inside their killing zone.
We called them die fliegende Festungen, but what made them true fortresses was not their armor or formation discipline. It was those 50 caliber machine guns that never stopped firing, never jammed, never gave us an opening. We lost so many pilots, not to American fighters, but to bomber defensive fire. It was like flying into a meat grinder. The Germans had sophisticated weapons, better weapons, arguably. Their MG-131 13mm machine gun had a higher rate of fire. Their 20 and 30mm cannons were more destructive per hit. But sophistication means nothing when your opponent has achieved something you haven't: perfect reliability at massive scale. The Browning M2 fires in temperatures ranging from -40 degrees Celsius to +40 degrees. It operates at high altitude, where the air is thin and cold. It functions after being hit by enemy cannon fire. It keeps shooting even when the barrels glow red from sustained fire. And when that happens, American maintenance crews replace the overheated barrel in minutes, not hours, and the gun resumes firing without missing a beat. This is the reality German pilots learn mission by mission, sortie by sortie. The American guns work, always, in all conditions, with unlimited ammunition, manned by crews who've been trained to hold the trigger down and keep shooting until the enemy is dead or gone. Meanwhile, German pilots nurse weapons that jam in the cold, that require careful maintenance, that fail at critical moments. They conserve ammunition because resupply is uncertain. They make careful, aimed shots, while Americans spray thousands of rounds and accept the waste as the price of overwhelming firepower. And slowly, inevitably, the mathematics of attrition assert themselves. The Luftwaffe bleeds experienced pilots. Young replacements arrive with minimal training, fly 1 or 2 missions, and die. By mid-1944, the Luftwaffe has effectively lost air superiority over Western Europe. The 50 caliber machine gun, simple, unsophisticated, just a heavy machine gun that works, has helped shoot the German Air Force out of the sky. But if German pilots thought they had it bad, they should have talked to their brothers fighting on the ground. June 6, 1944, Normandy. Oberstleutnant Hans von Luck commands elements of the 21st Panzer Division defending against the Allied invasion. This is no ordinary officer. Von Luck earned the Knight's Cross at El Alamein, fought across North Africa and the Eastern Front. After the war, he'll write Panzer Commander, one of the most acclaimed German military memoirs of the 20th century. Right now, watching American forces establish their beachhead, von Luck is experiencing something he's never felt before: complete tactical helplessness. It's not the numbers. He's fought against numerical superiority before. It's not the artillery. German forces learned to respect Soviet artillery on the Eastern Front. It's not even the air superiority, though that's devastating enough. It's the machine guns. American doctrine has placed the .50 caliber Browning on virtually every combat vehicle. Jeeps mount them, trucks mount them, half-tracks mount them, tanks mount them on turret roofs, tank destroyers mount them. Even supply vehicles carry them for convoy protection. The Americans have achieved something the Germans never attempted: universal heavy machine gun coverage across their entire force structure. Von Luck watches through his binoculars as an American column advances inland from the beach. He counts the vehicles, estimates the number of .50 caliber machine guns. The mathematics are staggering. A single American armored company has more heavy machine guns than an entire German regiment. He orders his panzer grenadiers to engage. They're good soldiers, veterans. They know how to use terrain, how to establish ambush positions, how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The moment never comes. The Americans don't advance carefully, waiting for the enemy to reveal positions. They fire continuously into any suspicious location: tree lines, farm buildings, stone walls, hedgerows. The .50 caliber machine guns rake everything with sustained fire, either suppressing hidden positions or provoking return fire that reveals locations. Von Luck's grenadiers report that movement in daylight is impossible. Any attempt to maneuver draws immediate and overwhelming fire. They can hear the distinctive deep rhythmic thunder of the M2 Browning from kilometers away. That sound becomes the soundtrack of their retreat across France. What von Luck discovers, what every German commander in France learns through bitter experience, is that the Americans have turned warfare into a mathematical equation. They don't need superior tactics. They have enough ammunition to make mistakes and still win. Later, in his memoir, von Luck will write, "We had been told our training and tactical doctrine would overcome American material advantage. At Normandy, I learned the truth. The Americans did not need superior tactics. They had enough ammunition to make mistakes and still win. Their .50 caliber machine guns were on every vehicle, every position, firing continuously. We could not move in daylight. Any attempt to maneuver drew immediate and overwhelming fire."
Let's talk about what this looks like from a German soldier's perspective. You're Gefreiter Ernst Schmidt, rifleman in a Panzer Grenadier Company. You fought on the Eastern Front. You've survived Stalingrad, where Soviet artillery turned entire city blocks into moonscapes and human wave attacks came day after day. You thought you'd seen the worst of industrial warfare. Then you face the Americans in France, and you realize you understood nothing. The Soviets hit you with artillery and masses of infantry. The British demonstrate tactical excellence and coordination. The Americans? They just fire at everything until it stops moving. Your squad is tasked with ambushing an American supply convoy. Standard doctrine: let the lead vehicles pass, destroy vehicles in the middle to create a roadblock, systematically destroy the trapped convoy. It's worked against British and Soviet supply lines. It should work here. The convoy appears. You wait for the signal. The first vehicles pass. Your squad leader signals, "Now." Your machine gunner opens fire. The American truck explodes. Perfect shot. The convoy stops. This is the moment when you press the attack, when German training and discipline overcome American numbers. Except every third vehicle in the convoy has a .50 caliber machine gun, and they all start firing simultaneously, in alternating directions. Vehicles on the right fire right, vehicles on the left fire left, creating intersecting fields of fire that cover both flanks of the road. The volume of return fire is unlike anything you've experienced. Your position, a hedgerow that should provide decent cover, disintegrates under the sustained fire. .50 caliber rounds punch through the earth and wood bank like it's paper. The machine gunner beside you takes a round through the chest and simply ceases to exist. No death rattle, no final words. One moment he's there, the next there's just pieces.
You dive into a drainage ditch. Rounds tear up the ground around you. You can hear them, that distinctive crack, crack, crack as they pass overhead. Each one carries enough energy to tear a human body in half. You stay in that ditch for 3 hours while the Americans methodically destroy your company's positions with sustained fire. When you finally crawl away after nightfall, your entire squad is gone. The Americans lost 1 truck. This experience, multiply it across every German unit fighting in France. The ambush tactics don't work. The infiltration tactics don't work. The combined arms doctrine that defeated Soviet forces on the Eastern Front doesn't work. Because none of those approaches account for an enemy who can bring overwhelming firepower to bear on any target, instantly, without ammunition concerns, using weapons that function perfectly in all conditions. German squad leaders start refusing orders to attack during daylight. Not from cowardice, these are veteran troops. From mathematics, movement equals death. The Americans fire at sounds, at movement, at suspected positions, at nothing. They have unlimited ammunition and doctrine that encourages expenditure. German forces have limited ammunition and doctrine that demands conservation. The American M16 multiple-gun motor carriage demonstrates this philosophy at its most extreme. It's a half-track mounting 450 caliber machine guns in a powered turret. Combined rate of fire, 2,200 rounds per minute. American soldiers call it the meat chopper. German soldiers have a different name. They call it Todesregen, death rain. When an M16 opens fire, the sound is unlike anything on a battlefield. Not the individual thump, thump, thump of a single gun, but a continuous roar like tearing metal. The 4 guns fire slightly out of sync, creating a sound that human nervous systems interpret as immediate mortal danger. Originally designed for anti-aircraft defense, M16 units find themselves repurposed for ground support by late 1944. The Luftwaffe has been largely defeated over Western Europe. American anti-aircraft units need new targets. They find them. Official reports from the 473rd AAA Battalion in November 1944 note that the primary mission of the M16, anti-aircraft defense, has often become secondary. The half-track's main purpose, now destroying German infantry and light vehicles. During the Battle of the Bulge, M16 units will be credited with breaking up numerous German infantry attacks simply by traversing their 4-gun mounts across attacking formations. The effect is described by survivors as watching a horizontal rainstorm of metal that leaves nothing intact. Trees are cut down, stone walls crumble, vehicles are shredded, and human bodies? There's often nothing left to identify.
But if the ground war is hell, the air war is something worse. Because on the ground, you can at least dig in, you can hide. In the air, there's nowhere to run. German ground forces learned to recognize the silhouette of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt at great distances. American pilots call it the Jug. German soldiers have different names, none of them printable in official reports. Each P-47 carries 8 Browning M2 machine guns in its wings. 8. That's 4,400 rounds per minute of combined firepower during strafing runs. A flight of 4 P-47s means 32 50-caliber machine guns converging on a target area. Feldwebel Otto Müller survives multiple strafing attacks during the retreat from Normandy in August 1944. His testimony, recorded during prisoner interrogation, captures the absolute helplessness German ground troops feel against American air power. You hear the engines first. By the time you look up, they are already firing. The bullets hit the road, the vehicles, the men, all at once. There is no cover that works. Stone walls crumble, trees are cut down, metal tears like paper. You can be behind a truck one moment and the truck is gone the next, just pieces of metal and fire. The P-47 proves particularly effective in what American pilots call armed reconnaissance missions. Rather than targeting specific objectives, flights patrol assigned sectors looking for targets of opportunity. Any German vehicle moving during daylight risks attack. Any troop column, any supply convoy, any artillery position. The 850 caliber machine guns give pilots enough ammunition to engage multiple targets during a single sortie. A pilot might strafe a convoy,
climb to altitude, spot a tank platoon, dive to attack them, then strafe a crossroads on the return flight. The ammunition capacity, approximately 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, allows for sustained combat. German forces adapt by moving primarily at night and in bad weather. But this adaptation comes at enormous cost to operational tempo and logistics. Supplies that should take hours to move require days. Reinforcements arrive late or not at all. The German Luftwaffe's inability to contest American air superiority by mid-1944 means German ground forces operate under constant threat of air attack. And the primary weapon delivering that threat is the 50 caliber machine gun. Listen to how this works from the German perspective. You're an Obergefreiter commanding a Pak-40 anti-tank gun crew. It's July 1944, somewhere in Normandy. You've been ordered to move your gun from one position to another, a routine repositioning that should take 20 minutes. But it's 1400 hours, daylight, clear skies, and you know the Americans control the air absolutely. Your crew looks at you. They know the risk, so do you, but orders are orders. You hitch the gun to its prime mover, an aging Opel Blitz truck that's held together with wire and hope. The crew climbs aboard. You pull onto the road. For 3 minutes, nothing happens. Maybe the fighter bombers are somewhere else. Maybe you'll be lucky. Then you hear it, that distinctive sound of radial engines, American engines. "Heraus!" you scream. "Out! Everyone out! Now!" Your crew abandons the truck and sprints to the tree line. You dive into a ditch just as the first P-47 begins its run. The pilot opens fire at 800 meters. You see the muzzle flashes on the aircraft's wings, 8 points of light. Then you hear the sound. Not individual shots, a sustained roar like the world's largest zipper being pulled open at incredible speed. The truck disappears. Not destroyed gradually, just gone. Transformed in seconds from a functional vehicle into scrap metal and fire. The Pak-40 gun, which cost thousands of Reichsmarks and took skilled workers weeks to manufacture, is smashed into uselessness. The P-47 pulls up. You think it's over. Then you hear the second one coming. This pilot targets the tree line where your crew is hiding. 50 caliber rounds shred through the foliage. You press yourself into the mud at the bottom of the ditch while branches, leaves, and bark rain down around you. The pilot makes 2 passes, firing continuously before climbing away. When silence finally returns, you check on your crew. 2 dead. 1 wounded so badly he'll die before you can get him to an aid station. 3 unhurt physically, but shaking so hard they can barely stand. You've lost your gun, your truck, and half your crew. The Americans have expended maybe 500 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition and perhaps 20 minutes of flight time. This is the mathematics of industrial warfare. Your gun took months to build and skilled men to operate. Their ammunition is stamped out in the millions. They can afford this exchange. You cannot. By late 1944, German forces moved during daylight only in absolute emergencies. This single adaptation, forced by American air superiority enabled by reliable, ubiquitous 50 caliber machine guns, cripples German operational capability more effectively than any other single factor. When the fighting moves into towns and cities, the 50 caliber reveals another dimension of its effectiveness. Traditional military wisdom says urban warfare favors the defender. Buildings provide cover and concealment. Streets create natural choke points. An outnumbered force with good defensive positions should hold out against superior numbers. American forces with 50 caliber machine guns render traditional wisdom obsolete. Masonry that will stop rifle fire and even machine gun fire offers little protection against 50 caliber rounds. The massive projectile simply punches through. First wall, second wall, interior partitions. The round keeps going until its energy is exhausted. German soldiers hiding in safe positions on the second or third floor of buildings find that safety is an illusion. American tank commanders quickly develop a brutal but effective technique. A tank halts at a street corner, and the commander traverses the turret-mounted 50 caliber across building facades, firing continuously at any window, doorway, or potential position. The sustained fire forces German defenders to take cover. Infantry advances while the Germans are suppressed. The tank moves forward and repeats the process at the next intersection. This isn't sophisticated combined arms tactics, this is firepower saturation. But it works. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber commands a company defending Aachen during the American assault in October 1944. He's a veteran of street fighting in Stalingrad. He knows urban warfare. He knows how to turn buildings into fortresses, how to use rubble for concealment, how to make the Americans pay for every street. What Weber doesn't anticipate is that the Americans won't play by the rules. His men establish positions in buildings with good fields of fire, machine guns covering the approaches, Panzerfaust teams ready to engage American armor at close range. It's textbook defense. Then an American tank appears. Weber's Panzerfaust operator prepares to fire, but before he can expose himself, the tank's 50 caliber opens up. The sustained fire literally demolishes the building's facade. Masonry fragments fill the air like shrapnel. The Panzerfaust operator is killed by debris before he can take his shot. Weber moves his men to fallback positions. The Americans simply repeat the process. Tank-mounted 50 caliber suppress potential positions while infantry advances. German soldiers take cover behind interior walls. The 50 caliber rounds punch through. By the third day of fighting, Weber's company has been reduced from 120 men to 38 effectives. Not from direct assaults, from the cumulative effect of constant 50 caliber fire that makes every position untenable. In his post-war account, Weber writes, "We would position in upper-story rooms with good fields of fire. American tanks would approach and destroy the buildings with 50 caliber fire and tank main guns. The 50 caliber rounds would penetrate walls and ceilings. There was no safe place. Soldiers would take cover behind furniture or interior walls, and the bullets would find them anyway. The only way to survive was to abandon positions before the Americans concentrated fire on them. But abandoning positions meant losing ground, and there was no ground left to lose." This is the psychological impact that breaks units. Not one catastrophic defeat, not a single decisive battle, just the slow, grinding realization that there is no effective defense against an enemy who can bring overwhelming firepower to bear on any position at any time. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest. Germany launches its last major offensive in the West. Dozens of divisions, hundreds of tanks. Total tactical surprise. For the first few days, it appears possible that German armor might break through to the Meuse River and split the Allied armies. Then American logistics reasserts itself, and with it, the 50 caliber machine gun. American units rush to the Ardennes, carry their standard load of ammunition and equipment. This means even ad hoc defensive positions can bring devastating volumes of 50 caliber fire to bear on German attacks. At Bastogne, surrounded American forces use their 50 caliber machine guns to devastating effect against German infantry attacks. The guns operate reliably despite temperatures well below freezing, mud, snow, and the general chaos of sustained combat. German forces make one critical error in their planning. They assumed bad weather would ground American air power and reduce American fire superiority. They're half right. Weather does initially limit air operations, but German planners haven't accounted for the fact that ground-mounted 50 caliber machine guns are unaffected by weather, and that American logistics can sustain ammunition expenditure at rates Germans find incomprehensible. Oberst Gerhard Lindemann commands a Volksgrenadier regiment in the initial assault. His unit achieves local success. They capture several villages, take hundreds of American prisoners, advance nearly 10 kilometers in the first 2 days.
Then they encounter an American position that won't break. It's not a major strong point, maybe 2 platoons of infantry, some hastily dug foxholes, 3 tanks. But those tanks each have a 50 caliber machine gun. And the American infantry has brought along a truck-mounted M2, and there's apparently no limit to their ammunition. Lindemann orders the attack. His grenadiers advance in textbook fashion, covering fire, tactical bounds, using terrain for concealment. The Americans just open fire with everything and keep shooting. The 50 caliber fire is continuous, unrelenting. Lindemann watches through his binoculars as entire squads go down, not from careful aimed shots, from sheer volume of fire that makes the mathematics of survival impossible. If 1,000 rounds per minute are flying across your avenue of approach, it doesn't matter how good your tactics are. Someone is going to get hit. After 3 failed attacks and 200 casualties, Lindemann withdraws. The Americans still hold their position. They've probably expended 10,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. But ammunition is something the Americans have. German soldiers are something Lindemann doesn't. The Battle of the Bulge devolves into exactly the kind of grinding attrition fight that favors American material superiority. Weather clears, American air power returns, those P-47s with their wing-mounted 50s. German forces that have advanced beyond their supply lines find themselves under constant attack from ground and air, all of it centered on that distinctive weapon. By January 1945, the offensive has failed. Germany has expended its last reserves, achieving nothing except to demonstrate one final time that tactical excellence means nothing against overwhelming material superiority. February 1945, the Rhineland. General-Major Fritz Bayerlein has fought across North Africa, Russia, and France. He commanded the elite Panzer Lehr Division. He's one of Germany's most respected tactical commanders. After the war, he'll write extensive manuscripts for the United States Army Historical Division, analyzing what went wrong. His conclusion is both simple and devastating. The Americans solved warfare. Not through superior tactics, not through better training, through a system that could project overwhelming firepower without requiring skill or sophistication. Bayerlein watches his divisions destroyed, not primarily by bombing or artillery, though those are significant factors, but by the cumulative effect of constant small arms fire that prevents his forces from maneuvering effectively. American 50 caliber machine guns mounted on every vehicle mean his troops cannot move to respond to American advances without being engaged immediately. His infantry cannot establish ambush positions because reconnaissance by fire exposes them before they can engage. His armor cannot operate without infantry support, but his infantry cannot operate under constant fire from weapons that can penetrate any cover. In his post-war writings, Bayerlein makes a stark observation. The Americans had found a way to project superior firepower without requiring superior training or tactics. Their 50 caliber machine gun, operated by soldiers with minimal specialized training and supplied with vast quantities of ammunition, created a baseline of firepower that German forces could not match with more sophisticated weapons and better trained crews. This is the intellectual breakthrough that German commanders struggled to articulate during the war, but understand clearly in hindsight. They brought a craftsman's approach to a mass production war. German doctrine emphasized skill, training, tactical excellence. The MG-42 was a superior machine gun in many respects. Higher rate of fire, lighter weight, quicker barrel changes. German tank crews were better trained than their American counterparts. German infantry understood combined arms tactics better than American infantry. None of it mattered, because the Americans had built a system where adequate weapons produced in overwhelming quantities trumped superior weapons produced in limited numbers, where reliable weapons supplied without restriction defeated sophisticated weapons supplied sparingly, where doctrine that valued suppression and destruction overcame doctrine that valued conservation and precision. The 50 caliber machine gun was the perfect embodiment of this philosophy. It wasn't the most sophisticated weapon.
It wasn't the fastest firing or the most accurate. It was simply the most effective because it combined three qualities. Reliability, it worked every time in all conditions with minimal maintenance. Ubiquity, it was on every bomber, every fighter, every combat vehicle, every convoy truck, every defensive position. Abundance, it was supplied with ammunition in quantities that made conservation unnecessary.
When German soldiers expressed hatred for the 50 caliber, they were really expressing hatred for what it represented. An entire industrial system they couldn't match, a military philosophy they couldn't counter, a way of warfare that rendered their training and courage irrelevant. Listen to the testimony of Feldwebel Kurt Steiner, captured near the Ruhr in March 1945. We were told German soldiers were better trained, that our tactics were superior, that our weapons were more advanced. Perhaps this was true, but the Americans didn't need to be better soldiers. They just needed more bullets, and they had more bullets than we had men. This is the essence of industrial warfare. The side that can sustain higher material expenditure will prevail regardless of tactical skill disparities. The 50 caliber machine gun, simple, reliable, ubiquitous, proved this theorem with every burst of fire. Let's understand what 50 caliber fire actually does to a human body. This isn't for shock value. This is to understand why German soldiers develop such visceral fear of this weapon. The M2 Browning fires the .5 caliber Browning machine gun cartridge. The standard M33 ball round is half an inch in diameter, weighs 707 grains. Compare this to a rifle bullet at about 150 grains, and leaves the barrel at 2,910 feet per second. The muzzle energy is approximately 12,000 foot-pounds. For comparison, a 7.92 millimeter Mauser rifle round, the standard German infantry weapon, delivers about 2,600 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. The 50 caliber has nearly 5 times the energy. When this projectile hits a human, it doesn't just penetrate, it transfers massive kinetic energy into tissue. A hit to a limb doesn't wound, it amputates. The bone doesn't fracture, it shatters into fragments. The surrounding tissue doesn't tear, it explosively cavitates. A hit to the torso is almost invariably fatal. The projectile doesn't simply punch a hole, it creates a temporary cavity many times larger than the bullet itself. Internal organs are liquefied by hydrostatic shock. Blood vessels throughout the body rupture from the pressure wave. German field hospitals learned to recognize 50 caliber casualties by the nature of their wounds. Medical personnel could do little except provide comfort and attempt to stabilize patients for evacuation. Many wounded never reached field hospitals. But the physical wounds were only part of the terror. The psychological impact extended beyond direct casualties. German units that came under sustained 50 caliber fire suffered combat exhaustion and breakdown of unit cohesion at rates higher than units that faced conventional small arms fire. Medical officers noted that soldiers who had been subjected to repeated 50 caliber attacks, even when not physically wounded, showed signs of severe stress and combat fatigue. The knowledge that the next burst of fire could not be survived by taking cover, that luck rather than skill determined survival, created a sense of helplessness that was medically and militarily significant. Night combat introduced another terror. American ammunition used a ratio of 1 tracer round to every 4 ball rounds. This meant every fifth 50 caliber bullet was a glowing tracer that marked the trajectory of the burst. German soldiers watching American 50 caliber fire at night could see death approaching. Streaks of light that seemed to move slowly enough to track visually, but that arrived with devastating speed and force. The psychological effect was profound. Soldiers could see the tracers converging on their position. They knew that for every tracer they saw, 4 additional rounds were flying along the same path invisible. The human instinct to duck or dodge was useless. By the time a soldier saw the tracer, the rounds had already arrived. American forces exploited this deliberately. Reconnaissance by fire at night meant sending streams of tracer-laden 50 caliber fire across suspected positions. The visual effect was overwhelming. Entire sectors would light up with intersecting streams of tracers. The noise of the firing, combined with the visual impact, created an environment German soldiers described as hellish. Gefreiter Hans Dietrich, captured near Aachen in October 1944, described the experience in his interrogation. At night, you can see them shooting even when they cannot see you. They fire at sounds, at movement, at nothing. The tracers show you where death is coming from, and you cannot escape it. You watch the streams of fire and know that for every tracer you see, 4 more bullets are in the air. Then you calculate that one gun firing for 10 seconds sends 50 rounds towards you and only 10 are tracers. You see 10 streaks of light and know 40 more rounds are in the air. Then you realize there are not 1, but 5 or 10 guns firing. The mathematics of it are terrifying. You cannot survive that volume of fire by skill or courage. You survive by luck alone. This is warfare by mathematics, and the Germans are on the wrong side of the equation. Now we reach the core revelation, the thing German commanders understand in hindsight but struggle to articulate during the war. The 50 caliber machine gun isn't feared because it's a great weapon. It's feared because it represents a great system. John Browning began development of the weapon in 1917 during World War I. The M1921 water-cooled version entered service but proved too heavy for mobile warfare. The M2 air-cooled version was adopted in 1933, 11 years before D-Day. By 1944, it's an old design, simple, conventional, nothing revolutionary. But American industry produces nearly 2 million 50 caliber machine guns during the war years. 2 million. The M2 HB heavy barrel version alone accounts for approximately 350,000 units. For comparison, Germany produces approximately 350,000 MG42 machine guns during the entire war, total, all variants. The Americans make that many 50 calibers of just one model. This is the industrial truth that German commanders face. America isn't just out fighting them. America is out producing them at ratios that make resistance mathematically futile. Every American heavy bomber carries 13 M2s. Every fighter, like the P-47, carries 8. Every American combat vehicle carries at least 1. Every American infantry company has organic 50 caliber machine gun sections. American anti-aircraft units can repurpose their quad-mount M16s for ground combat. The weapon is everywhere, always available, always supplied with ample ammunition, and it works every time it's needed. German weapons might be more sophisticated in individual respects. The MG42 had a higher rate of fire. German aircraft cannons were more destructive per hit. But sophistication means nothing when your opponent has achieved universal deployment of a weapon that's good enough for every role it needs to fill. AC Sparkplug, Frigidaire, Guide Lamp, and Colt, American companies that normally made civilian products, produced 50 caliber machine guns by the tens of thousands. This scale of production meant American forces never lacked replacement weapons or spare parts. Compare this to German production, where specialized factories made specific weapons and Allied bombing disrupted supply chains constantly. An American unit with a damaged 50 caliber could get a replacement within days. A German unit with a damaged MG42 might wait weeks. The ammunition disparity is even starker. American industry produced billions of 50 caliber rounds. Billions. American commanders never needed to ration fire. American doctrine encouraged saturation and suppression. If you weren't sure whether a position held enemy troops, the American solution was simple. Fire 10,000 rounds at it. German commanders, by contrast, constantly operated under ammunition restrictions. Every round had to count. Fire discipline was essential. Conservation was doctrine. When these two philosophies collided, the outcome was inevitable. April 1945. The war in Europe is ending. Klaus Werner, the soldier we met at Holtzwihr, is now in a POW camp. He's alive, which makes him luckier than most of his comrades. In the camp, German soldiers talk. They compare experiences, and one theme emerges repeatedly: the 50 caliber. Men who fought in Normandy tell stories identical to men who fought in the Rhineland. Pilots who flew over Germany describe the same experiences as tank crews who fought in the Ardennes. The weapon was everywhere. It never failed. There was never a shortage of ammunition. In May, after the surrender, American interrogators interview German officers for the historical division. They ask about tactics, doctrine, what went wrong. The answers are remarkably consistent.
Generaloberst Albert Schlemm, who commanded the 1st Parachute Army, notes that by early 1945, German soldiers had learned to recognize the sound of 50 caliber fire at great distances. The knowledge that any position could be engaged by these weapons, that any movement could draw immediate fire, and that German forces had no effective counter, created what he called a defensive mentality that made offensive operations nearly impossible. General der Panzertrooper Fritz Bayerlein, whose analysis we've already discussed, makes an even more pointed observation. American forces had created a system where the baseline of firepower was so high that German tactical excellence was irrelevant. The Americans didn't need better soldiers, they just needed more bullets. This is the lesson of the 50 caliber. In modern industrial warfare, adequate weapons produced in overwhelming quantities defeat superior weapons produced in limited numbers. Reliable weapons supplied without restriction overcome sophisticated weapons supplied sparingly. Doctrine that values suppression and destruction trumps doctrine that values conservation and precision.
The Germans brought craftsmen to a factory floor. They brought skilled artisans to an assembly line. They brought warriors to an industrial slaughter. And they lost. The 50 caliber machine gun is still in service 80 years after it entered production. It has outlasted every weapon system that opposed it in World War II. It has served in every American conflict from World War II through the present day. The design is essentially unchanged from 1933. This longevity reflects not just the soundness of the design, but the effectiveness of the military philosophy it embodies. When you create a weapon that works reliably, produce it in massive quantities, supply it without restriction, and integrate it universally into your force structure, you create more than a weapon system. You create a strategic advantage that superior training cannot overcome. Return with me to January 26, 1945, Holtzwihr, France. Obergefreiter Klaus Werner is in that aid station, watching medics work on men torn apart by 50 caliber fire. He's thinking about his company, 250 men that morning, 70 effective now. He's thinking about the American lieutenant standing on a burning tank destroyer, firing continuously for over an hour. One man, one gun. The sergeant beside him said something Werner will remember for the rest of his life. It's not the gun, it's what it represents. The Americans have so many of these weapons that they can afford to let one soldier stop an entire company. They have so much ammunition that they can fire continuously for an hour without worry. They have such good logistics that this gun on this burning vehicle has been maintained perfectly, supplied perfectly, positioned perfectly. We are not fighting a soldier with a gun. We are fighting an entire industrial system that this gun represents. And you cannot defeat a system with courage or skill or tactical excellence. You can only outproduce it. And we cannot. This is the revelation at the heart of the 50 caliber's dominance. German soldiers didn't hate the M2 Browning because it was a great weapon. They hated it because it was a good enough weapon backed by a system they couldn't match. They hated it because every time they heard that distinctive thump, 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 they were hearing the sound of American factories working 3 shifts. They were hearing the sound of supply ships crossing the Atlantic unmolested. They were hearing the sound of an industrial capacity so vast that ammunition expenditure was never a concern. They were hearing, in short, the sound of inevitability. German tactical doctrine emphasized the Schwerpunkt, the decisive point where concentrated force could achieve breakthrough. American doctrine emphasized ubiquitous firepower that made every point potentially decisive. German training produced skilled soldiers who could fight effectively with limited resources. American training produced adequate soldiers supported by unlimited resources. German weapons design emphasized sophisticated solutions to technical problems. American weapons design emphasized reliability and mass production. At every level, the philosophies were opposite, and at every level, industrial warfare favored the American approach. The 50 caliber machine gun didn't win World War II. No single weapon wins wars, but it symbolized and enabled the military-industrial system that did win.
It represented the transformation of warfare from a contest of skill to a contest of productive capacity. When German veterans gathered in the decades after the war, they told stories. Stories of Tiger tanks that could destroy any American tank in a fair fight, but there were never enough Tigers, and there were always more American tanks. Stories of Luftwaffe aces who could outfly any American pilot, but the aces were dead and the Americans kept coming. Stories of tactical brilliance that won battles but lost the war, because brilliant tactics cannot overcome overwhelming material superiority. And through all these stories ran one common thread: the memory of that sound, that deep rhythmic thunder. The Browning M2 firing between 450 and 575 rounds per minute. The sound that meant American forces were nearby, well supplied, and about to make your position untenable. Thump, 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 thump. The sound of democracy made steel. The sound of industrial might made manifest. The sound that German soldiers learned to hate not because it killed them, though it did, efficiently and reliably, but because it represented a truth they couldn't accept. In modern war, the nation that can produce more, supply more, and expend more will win, period. Skill, courage, tactical excellence, warrior tradition, these things matter in individual engagements, but industrial capacity determines who wins the war. The Browning M250 caliber machine gun wasn't the most sophisticated heavy machine gun of World War II. It wasn't the fastest firing or the most accurate or the lightest. It was simply the most effective because it combined reliability, ubiquity, and overwhelming logistical support into a system that turned warfare into mathematics. And in that equation, Germany never had a chance. Lieutenant Audie Murphy received the Medal of Honor for his actions at Holtzwihr. He survived the war, became an actor, and struggled with what we now call PTSD until his death in a plane crash in 1971. Obergefreiter Klaus Werner survived the war in American captivity. He returned to Germany, rebuilt his life, and decades later gave an interview to a military historian. Asked what he remembered most about fighting the Americans, Werner didn't hesitate. The sound of their .50 caliber machine guns. Even now, at night, sometimes I hear it in my dreams. Thump, 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 thump. The sound that meant we were about to lose another position, another battle, another piece of ground. The sound that meant Germany was losing the war, one burst of fire at a time. That sound echoed across the battlefields of Europe, from Normandy to the Rhine. It thundered in the skies over Germany. It roared through the streets of Aachen and Cologne and 100 other cities. It was the sound of American industrial warfare. Simple, brutal, unstoppable. The sound the Germans learned to hate most of all.